Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 27th edition of Coffee with Ashish. And we are very privileged today to have a special guest with us, Shri Mandip Singh Soin ji with us. And before we get into conversation with him, as always, from a context perspective, we have covered so much in the last 26 episodes in terms of different verticals of travel, different types of travel intermediaries, and different formats. But I think one key aspect which we have missed out is different genres of travel. So we've always looked at travel as corporate and retail. I mean, and that's the level of fragmentation we did while talking about travel industry. But I think now the time is also right to go a bit more detail into different categories and genres of travel, and try to understand the trends which are emerging in those categories and learn from the experts in those fields. And today's category is adventure, and personally it's very close to my heart. And I think all young people now, it's a big fad that everybody in the name of adventure. And adventure is also very different, right? It could be hard adventure or soft adventure. Most of us are happy by doing a little bit of trekking in and around Himachal and Uttarakhand, or maybe some of us dare to go to Leh. But I think the gentleman whom we have today is sort of done and dusted much beyond that. And I think there'll be a lot of learning. But adventure in general, if you see, and we discussed that in one of the earliest sessions on our show as well, Mandeep ji, where we talked about that the travel started, in fact, through adventure, whether it was Captain Cook or Christopher Columbus. I mean, it was all adventure-led tourism, but obviously mandated through some commercial enterprise or companies or kings and queens. But the genesis of travel anyway started through the fact of exploring, reaching out, and adventure. So it's inbuilt in the whole domain of travel. And I think if you talk about how it formally sort of started as a leisure activity, that was in the 1800s. I was reading about Mandeep ji, that Marco Polo and these guys sort of set the tone. But it was only when Matterhorn in Alps in 1850s was one of the peaks which people started trekking into, and Colorado River in the US, the descent of Colorado in 1869. Those two events sort of marked the start of structured adventure tourism, and now obviously it's a trend. Everybody wants to do it. And on a lighter note, as always, Mandeep ji, I share a couple of cartoons to capture the emotion. And for adventure tourism, I wanted to show you and our audience. On the left, I think many of us are aware of such experiences where you ask for adventure holiday, and the travel agent tells you that just take one of our cheap holiday packages and you will get enough adventure in your entire journey. And on the right, if you see, and I've experienced something similar in some of the places I've been, where since these places are not very well documented, not very well captured like traditional hotels, sometimes people have that level of expectations, not realizing that if you're going in the wilderness, you will probably not get all those luxuries which you are used to. So I think that's how it has evolved. And we are so privileged, everyone, to have with us such a doyen of the industry, who's sort of his profile goes sort of into pages. But as a quick summary for everybody, he's a renowned mountaineer, explorer, environmentalist, and he runs a firm called Abix Expeditions, which started almost, I can't even imagine, it was started in 1979. So it's almost 41 years he has been into the business, running it. Looks very young still, probably because of all the hiking and trekking he does. IBEX is a well-known firm in this area of adventure tourism. They are a recipient of National Award as India's most innovative tour operator in this category. They have also won awards from prestigious PATA and Green Globe Award for environmental best practices. Mandip ji is also the founder president of Responsible Tourism Society, and he's the longest serving judge of WTTC Tourism for Tomorrow Awards, and he's also a board member of the Global Adventure Travel Conservation Fund. He is a Saint Stephen graduate from Delhi University, and I love that phrase about him that he is a modest, badass mountaineer with terrible fun. So I'm sure we're going to hear some of those in our conversation today with you, Mandeep. And of course, Mandeep is also a well-known speaker at various international forums. He talks about environment, adventure, and travel at large. And he's also the recipient of the prestigious Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award for lifetime achievement by Honorable President of India. He is also the only Indian to have received NESS award by the Royal Geographic Society UK and citation of merit by Explorer Club USA. He currently resides with his wife, who is also an artist and poet, and they both are co-founders of their firm, which they founded 41 years ago. They both have been to all the seven continents. So that's something we're all envious of you. We can only see it in Facebook and Instagram, but you've been there, all the seven continents. And their children are also carrying forward their legacy, and both of them are as well in the field of adventure and mountaineering. So we are really, pleased and privileged to have you with us today, Mandeep ji. A very warm welcome to you on the show. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to Ashish to have a conversation with you while I enjoy my
I think you moved away.
coffee.
I think Mandip is disconnected. I can't see him.
Do you want to call him?
No, it must be his connection in the hills. He's in the Kamau Hills. Just give him a...
I think we have Anita ji with us. Anita ji, are you able to hear us? Anita ji, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
I think Mandip has gone off, Anita.
Okay, let me just try and catch him because I think the internet is a little dodgy.
Yeah.
But let me just catch him. One moment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm back.
Oh, you're back? All right. Yeah, we can see you larger than life. So, Mandip, this must be one of the most lopsided coffee, I must tell you, I'm having, you know. I mean, you there in the Kamau Hills and that lovely weather. And look at me here in Delhi humidity. Envious. And the other the other thing I must tell our listeners before you get to answering that is your fascinating color coordinates. So, you know, your purple up on the pagadi, I hope it matches your trousers, what you wear. You've been known to do that.
I've got well, I've got orange trousers, so I think my color coordination might look more like the painting that you got behind you, you know, with all the splash. But anyway,
right. Well, great.
Sorry to disappear on you.
No.
But you know, like they say in adventure, we always have a plan B. So I had to shift to my second internet connectivity. So hopefully this will be stable now.
Great. So let's just start off with your journey, Mandip. And it says that you were a 15-year-old and you stood at the summit of the Black Pearl in the Garhwal Himalayas, and that's where you got inspired to be where you are today. So you want to tell us about your journey and in a life which is known as expedition by itself? Just to set the context.
Sorry, can you just repeat that, Ashish? I just lost you for a minute.
Just to set the context of things, of a further discussion. Yeah.
Okay. No, I just want to say that basically it kind of started as a, hobby and an interest through high school and onto university and so on. And it was pretty much about, getting involved with various expeditions over the period of time for climbing. My school was quite active in, going on expeditioning and so on. And in the early days, which is what Karthik alluded to, which is the 70s, we were doing expeditions all the way across to the Himalaya. And then because the thread was adventure, we also said that in a country like India, which has got so much rich geographical diversity and cultural diversity, why not try other, landforms or activities which are like, say, crossing the Indian desert by camelback, or going and doing some rock climbing in different parts of the country. So it was all of those activities that were happening, which finally ended up getting me to get involved with it professionally. And that's pretty much where, in the beginning, we started with just pure adventure, and then it kind of led on to doing a lot of other tailor-made stuff. So that's broadly the context where I come from, really.
Right. So which would be your toughest expedition overseas and in India? I mean, if you were to look back over the years.
Yeah, I think overseas, I would probably put it as the year that I took off with a backpack straight after university. And I was traveling on a very, very tight budget, because way back in '79, the government of India didn't allow you to buy more than $500. That was your allowance.
Correct.
And so one was the challenge of surviving in that kind of tight budget. And I had set for myself a 1-year plan to go climbing, skiing, trekking, rock climbing, ice climbing, and learning all these skills, coming up to a particular level. And there were some pretty interesting experiences, some pretty desperate in terms of, the sheer technical stuff. I mean, we were in snow holes camping in Scotland, or making first Indian ascents in the Dolomites. And, so it brought a lot of challenges. And as I said, I was probably pushing the limits, both physically and mentally, for myself. So I guess in the overseas context, that might have been my toughest sort of 1 year of adventure, as it were, which was multiple. But I ended up, being a kind of an instructor in a outdoor school in Scotland and Wales for a few months. But, so it eased up. In India, I would think sometime in 1986, we were lucky to do a slightly more advanced mountaineering ascent of a mountain called Meru, which is actually in the Gangotri Valley. And it's a beautiful and a very technical peak. And in those days, Indians were not really known for, climbing on sort of hard routes. So there were 3 of us Indians and 1 Swedish friend of ours. And we made an ascent where basically we took no porters, no guides, no tents, and we made an ascent by just putting bivouacs or making snow platform, So that, I think, and we just had a, very specific 6-day meticulous planning. And we knew that we had to ascend the peak in 4 days, come back in 2 days. And with a lot of training and all, God willing, it all worked out. So that kind of really stretched us, including that we couldn't reach the summit. And we had to make an emergency stop for the night without tents, without any sleeping bags. We sat on ropes, made bad jokes to each other to keep ourselves awake and that kind of stuff. But we did ultimately achieve the objective. So I would probably put that as well.
Yeah, but did you ever think of giving the Everest a shot?
Well, actually, I was invited in the mid-80s by the government. But in those days, because we were sort of pushing the whole idea that we should do harder climbs. So the climb on Everest, which is the normal route, which is what India was doing then, although they were taking women's expedition as well, hoping that a woman would go up, which we did. But I thought that, going by the normal route was not really making a new statement as far as, men were concerned, because we had done that. So unfortunately, on principle, I didn't go. but it is still a good climb, provided you do it in a proper manner and not overly guided and so on, which is what has become the norm now.
Who would have thought come 2020 and we have another big obstacle and challenge in front of us in the COVID, right? And when the business we are all in,
which is
yeah,
which is yeah,
yeah,
which
business
is
which
larger than Everest.
the larger than Everest, and everything has been raised to the ground. So, but looking at it, because you've fought all the challenges in life, you've climbed all the peaks yourself in many ways, so to say, how do you see the next 2 years ahead in the segment of the business you are in, worldwide and in India again, if you were to look at
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of thinking, and some of the things that have emerged as what we would tend to emote with is that obviously it's going to be a slow start. It's going to be mainly domestic travel within countries or neighboring countries, etc. And I think to some degree, what we are hoping in the world of tourism and travel is that this is really the biggest pause button that we've pressed, for ourselves. And I'm sure a lot of industries are saying this, but more so ours, because we have a direct link and an impact on environment and on communities. So just the same way that we do or we can do a lot of good, I think tourism is also known to have had lots and lots of negative pressures, such as over tourism, such as beaches getting trashed, the garbage, and I don't need to spell out that story, but it's all there for all of us to know. So right now, and it seems that if you look back, tourism has been on the ascendant. It's like a man sitting in a jeep with a foot on the accelerator, and we haven't ever slowed down to see if we've knocked the odd person or a bush or gone over someone. And unfortunately, although the same truck delivers a lot of goodies to a lot of places that it visits, but it might be causing a few accidents. And that part is what is exciting right now for us as an industry globally to sort of come back with more responsible, with more sustainable, less mass tourism, possibly a longer stay in the destinations that people visit. So if all goes well, I very much hope that we'll be better for it. Though I must say it is an extremely trying time, and right now, even if people can climb this Everest through the normal route, I think people will be happy. We don't need to seek any tougher route because it is an incredible tsunami that has hit our industry too.
Yeah, but then staying back in the adventure and with general shifts in people's mentality, attitude, Karthik mentioned himself being a youngster of how he's taken up to a soft adventure, it may be. But do you see a shift there now more towards this kind of experiences on the tourism map? Or it's going to be still the same kind of tourists we see?
No, I think Karthik made a very valid point, and I think that kind of addresses one of our concerns at the very heart of tourism on how we conduct it in the future, which is all about responsible tourism. And the responsibility is not just for the industry, it is also for the right government policy. And the third person in the picture is, of course, the traveler himself or herself. So we want to actually, the process of sensitization has already started, at least in India and many countries abroad as well. So unless we don't sort of do things much more sustainably, I believe that the customer himself is going to be demanding from the industry a lot of good practices, which are a little more sensitive to communities, which are more, authentic, more immersive, and more meaningful journeys. And this is what I think, if the pressure comes through the traveler himself, then the industry has no choice but to, also come up to that expectation. And God willing, with a combination of the Ministry of Tourism in India agreeing to launch a responsible traveler campaign with our society, which is the Responsible Traveler, Responsible Tourism Society of India, if all that was to happen, then I think we are on a win-win situation. And I hope and pray that we don't have a situation of business as usual. Although, people are going to be desperate for business. So that's the reality. And at the same time, we want things to be sustainable. So we are hoping that sustainability and responsibility will win, and with some amount of checks and balances, be it regulations or suggestions or inspired travel. I hope we can make a better deal out of how we conduct tourism in the country.
Right, right. So, what do you think plagues India? I mean, I have again coming back to adventure for a minute. I wouldn't think twice before sitting on a giant wheel in Gold Coast in Australia or anywhere else in terms of my own safety. But ask me to get onto a zip line in Nimrana, I'll be pretty shaky to wonder whether I'll get onto the other side or I'll fall down the crevice. I mean, do you see India and equipments and all that a folly in the segment you are in? How do you see that being graded?
So, and a very interesting question, Ashish, and I'll tell you the sad part is that although we have some amazing operators and amazing operations, and, talking of zip lining, by the way, I've done it personally in Nimrana, and I've also done it in Rishikesh and a few other places abroad. And in fact, when they started, bungee and zip and stuff, I happened to be in New Zealand, so I went through the process. And I think the guys who are what we call the adventure tour operator stamped by the ministry have to follow certain guidelines. And in a way, we have a national body which is called the Adventure Tour Operators Association of India. I think the time has come where the association needs to come more into the public eye and educate the traveler in choosing the right company for adventure travel. Because sadly, why you won't trust something like that is because there are many punters in the game who may not be certified adventure operators. I mean, we know of situations in Manali and people who go paragliding and they break their legs, and there are some horrific videos floating around. So the Adventure Association actually has put up a set of wonderful guidelines under every activity, which has been ratified by the Ministry of Tourism. But I think there's a problem in the communication. We need to communicate to the customer, guys, you need to choose the right guys to go with. Otherwise, you'll end up with what Karthik was saying. You'll probably be promised this wonderful trip. I know that people have gone on treks in the Himalaya, and I was horrified to learn that an E company, said that they took a tour in the Himalaya and they fed them only Maggi noodles and said, this is the kind of food that you get in the Himalaya because it's a quick thing to, and if a person is a first timer, he doesn't know any better, which is crazy, So hopes that this can be sorted out.
Yeah. So let's just move away a bit from adventure to luxury, because you're also in the luxury end of the business. What does luxury really mean to you? Is it just high price as luxury? Some people seem to believe luxury means the more expensive it is, the more luxurious it becomes.
No, unfortunately, this is again, just the sort of definition of the word sometimes confuses people. In fact, for most of the customers that we handle, and of course, there's a huge amount of tailor making and personal attention. All of those are important ingredients to luxury travel, but it's not about staying in large branded hotels or something. Of course, the accommodation is very important, and you could, but you could very well be staying in small, charming boutique hotels or camps that are, like in India, you've got the Taj Safaris or the Sujan Luxury. These are great brands that fit into the luxury mold. But at the same time, I think it's the experiences at the end of the day and how you stitch the travel or the trip from the time the customer comes into the country and the time they exit. And what are the kind of interactions and what are the experiences that you build in, whether it's even going to a local community or going for a conservation experience, not just looking at wildlife, but the quality of interpretation. So at every level, I mean, even if you were doing, let's say, a guided sightseeing in New Delhi, you would like to use, not necessarily the average guide who may sometimes just be telling you stuff out of a rote, but possibly a kind of a professorial background who can,
Right.
have a good conversation and engage. So all those are very important ingredients, which apart from the basic physical sort of infrastructure, quality cars and good sort of, well-spoken drivers and all that. So there is that element which I think if we as a country can upscale a bit in terms of the soft skills, then we could, be able to sort of sell a lot more. And if more boutique hotels came up, which are personalized, rather than necessarily just the really, really big chains, they have a role, but that's what probably goes into, that whole.
So Mandip, let's just go to that 10-letter word known as technology, right? And I'm not suggesting for a minute that you, being in the business for 41 years, may probably feel that challenge. But if you look at it from demand creation, to be able to reach out to the customers, to be able to actually, for them to get the experience even prior to booking in terms of some kind of virtualization, to actually booking it, including using their handheld device during consumption, to right to the time they finish their treks or expeditions or whatever holidays, to posting it on the social media. There is a whole value chain technology today drives the whole product. I mean, there is little time when you did an expedition at the age of 15, where you couldn't even send a postcard home to say, look, mom, I did this, right? It's a different experience. And how do you see it happening and evolving ahead?
No, I mean, I think it's all very exciting, and we've, in some ways, we've embraced parts of it, whether it's in our marketing or it's our connection with the customers, or being on top of it whilst the tour happens. But we are obviously a more of a brick and mortar company as such. So to that extent, I think it's great for the evolving technology to be embraced, A, and B, for the young people who are using it as a platform to gain more customers, to market more effectively, and kudos to all of that. My only sort of red flag, or the caution that I always like to sound, we've seen a lot of examples where because you're a tech company, you sometimes may or may not have the knowledge on the ground, and you tend to collate a lot of information or put it together and then market it out, which is also very easy to do if you're tech savvy. So I would just say that if people know the product, they must go out in the field. I'm talking specifically in the area of adventure or special niche area travel, where you also have an impact on safety, or the environment. But if you were just doing general travel, of course, it's a no-brainer that it's being used so effectively by a lot of travel companies and technology companies. Sure.
Yeah. So a part two, quickly to the same question, Mandip, as you know, I work a lot with startups, mentoring them, guiding them. Yeah. They're all technology-driven guys. And I see a huge plethora of these guys putting boots on the ground the same way as you put boots on the ground on a physical sense. But what they don't have is what you have, and they have what you don't have. So is there a cause for you to collaborate in such manner that you provide, like I say, the boots on the ground, and they provide everything else? Do you see that happening in your activity?
Actually, I do. And, even pre-COVID, we were actually engaged with one or two organizations where we've been talking about the sort of marketing reach that they have.
Or the experience they can give to the customer. Yeah.
Exactly. Over the way they bring it out and so on. So we've got this platform, for example, of something called the Outdoor Voyage, which is
Mm.
a tech portal, which is basically like the TripAdvisor of adventure travel. Yeah, it's started by Outdoor Journal. And what they're trying to do is, to present everything much more deeper, in the sense with maps and, GPS
Correct.
locations and
Correct.
all those kind of things, which sometimes, we are still dealing with physical maps and
Right.
all of that and stuff like that. Yeah. So there is, I think, in the broader picture, you're absolutely right that more collaboration could yield a better deal for the end customer. Also because, like I said, the downsides of what the tech companies have shown so far, where you've had examples of what Karthik and I alluded to earlier, and some of them have made models where, on the ground, things have been a bit shifty. So this would be a great time to come together and add the muscle to each other and
Yeah.
possibly look at the future. Yeah.
So yeah. Let's continue that conversation a bit more offline, because,
Mhm.
like I said, they're very interesting guys who are looking for good ideas. But what they lack
Right.
is, of course, the technical capabilities such as what you provide and so on.
Yeah.
But lastly, of course, before I leave you and pass you to Karthik, if he has something to say, is your passion about ecotourism. One last word to the audience. What should be the practically somebody should do, including Government of India, while they're rebuilding this tourism activity? What attention should they be paying to rebuild it in a manner it should be built?
Yeah, well, this is, like I vaguely mentioned earlier about the responsible travel situation, or the campaign that they've verbally agreed to, and we are just in the process of the paperwork. I would generally say that if everybody could be involved in the movement, as in the responsible travel movement, that would be wonderful. People could go to our website, whether you are a traveler, whether you are an industry person, or indeed a government like a state government. What we are saying is, we should make the traveler more responsible. B, we should have the industry becoming obviously more sustainable and responsible. For that, the government has actually worked with the industry and created something called the Sustainable Tourism Criteria of India, which, when that is stamped on a company, you know that that person is responsible and will do operations sustainably. And I think if we go along this sort of path, there is a chance that we will relook and redefine the way we interact with communities, or the way we donate part of the earnings from a tour into a community or a conservation project. So there's a lot of good stuff that can happen, and I do believe that we are at inflection point where things like this have to come in, because both customer and industry, or at least the right thinking, people in the industry are saying so. So I'm very hopeful that we take the right path going ahead.
Okay, so can I leave a thought behind with you, which I've been nurturing for a long time?
Mhm.
Today, you have a mandated CSR responsibility role. Corporates in the country have to pay a certain percentage of their earning has to be put back into, be it Beti Bachao or Swachh Bharat or whatever is the mandated CSR role. So I'm saying the following, that I'm not saying don't put your money in what government has, but the governments must take the Swachh Bharat role to Swachh tourism a bit more. And which means whether you're aviation, whether you're a hotel company, whether you're a tour operator, anybody who's contributing to that CSR fund should necessarily put a large part of it, a certain percentage. Suppose you have to put 2% of your earning, 1% of it actually should go for the upkeep of the monuments, for upkeep of the environment, to make the foundation of this tourism product far greater than it is today. How would you react to that?
I think, as they say in Hindi, "Tumhare muh mein ghee shakkar," which is basically a great idea. And we've kind of toyed with it in another way, which is to say that, can the Responsible Tourism Society of India become a recipient of some of these funds from the corporate houses, which
Right.
are even outside of
Right, sure,
tourism?
sure.
So we could do some of that work. And I totally agree that there needs to be some thought and some discussion on the modalities of all of this. whether it is the larger, citizenry of the country, the corporate houses and all that, or whether it is within the tourism industry itself. All the association, my bane has been that even the associations, if they were to take 10% of their revenue and give it to the responsible tourism society to continue the work of sensitization, workshops, improving, work of whatever communities, or helping anti-poaching or whatever. I think these are wonderful concepts that somehow we've got to debate, and I will take it as a point of discussion at our society. And let's see. I think it's as they say, sola aane wali baat. So God willing, we can do it. Yeah.
Right. So with that, I move you back to Karthik, and Mandip, enjoy your stay in Sargakhet. I don't think you're going to be rushing back in a hurry back to Delhi, but when you do come, let's catch up over a real coffee. Over to you, Karthik.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ashish. Mandip ji, it's so inspiring to hear, and I completely resonate some of the thoughts you mentioned, because I have been, at the receiving end as a traveler of some of the experiences which you also elucidated. I just wanted to understand from you. So, as Ashish also said, so some of the large, call it OTAs or travel intermediaries or distribution companies who sell adventure, and you rightly know that they do not really understand adventure. They have no experience on the ground, how it works. But they are the ones who have the reach, and they sort of sell these to customers on a larger base. So is a way somebody like you with a limited reach, but extremely hands-on information, knowledge, experience, and expertise, do not have that sort of a reach and connect with the customers at scale. Now, there are two aspects. One is if somebody like you was to do that, raise capital, make it into a large company, get more and more people, connect to them and reach out to them and sell adventure travel. But then there is also the purist in you who would not probably want that, so many people reach out to these places, which probably, as someone who cares for environment, or has seen those even in Leh, for example, if I talk about snow leopard. I mean, 20 years back, snow leopard was very few people know. But now I know so many people from Delhi NCR who keep going there, and now the condition there, what I hear, is getting deteriorated. So that quagmire, I mean, what do you have to say to it? Do you see that somebody like you should scale up and have more people coming into adventure, tourism, and travel with self-dictated responsibility towards environment, which we know practically is not very easy to do in India, versus you saying that, okay, let's keep it as a niche place where only people who have that, who are true blue adventurous and purists, should come and consume adventure travel?
So Karthik, if I might, I think it's good that you burnt your tail a little bit, because that's obviously generated some great thought in this whole process. And I'll tell you that basically why we would agree to this alliance or whatever, though IBEX personally is not of the ethos of handling thousands of customers and all, because that's not our game. But we could certainly, have an alliance for many customers. But the proviso is, and that's again coming back to Ashish's earlier question, and one of the key things that we've also proposed, which I forgot to mention, is that every place in India, we have also proposed to the ministry and to the state governments that we definitely need to do carrying capacity studies. Yeah. And unless we do not have a basic fundamental thing of knowing how many customers are right for a destination, and whenever I say this, the tourism industry tends to get a bit nervous and say, my God, are we throttling a destination even before it's starting and blah, blah. No, actually, given what the situation is, you could probably have 4 or 5 times the number of people, but it needs to be spread out in a sensible manner, so that at any one point of time, you don't make a negative pressure. So I'm not very worried about the numbers in terms of the potential that India has, and in terms of the numbers that we handle vis-a-vis adventure or general, tailor-made stuff. We are woefully low. I mean, I've been to, luckily all the 7 continents and traveled in many countries, and I've seen how you can, with large numbers, have a really low impact tourism, but it needs the alliance of your industry, the government policy, the traveler, and it can be done in India too. So actually, I see that as a silver lining, but we've got to do those little things. And if we can't do it now, then I think I might be looking over my shoulder and saying, shit, what the hell did we start? Which I hope we don't have to.
Great. Ashish, do you have any concluding remarks?
No, except Mandip, I'll just share a little incident. I, of course, went to the boarding in Missouri a long time ago. And a few years ago, I decided to drive in from Dehradun to Missouri. And can you believe it? It's a season time. And one of the most harrowing experiences of my life, it took me 8 hours to drive from Dehradun to Missouri because the roads were congested. You couldn't drive. That's the amount of cars carrying capacity. I'm answering to your carry. That Missouri can't take so many cars.
Yeah, I know. I totally empathize. In fact, we've had endless discussions and we've had so many workshops and so on. But I think it needs to be scaled up at a very, very kind of an emergency level right now, because the same thing that you're saying happens in Manali, happens in Shimla, and it's sad the way we've allowed certain things to happen. So my fingers are crossed, and with a lot of hope in my heart and mind that we can actually tackle this mini sort of Everest Frankenstein that we made for ourselves.
Yeah.
Great. With this, we are at the end of the session. Thank you so much, Mandip ji, for joining. Thanks, Ashish. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you next week with our next session. Till then, stay safe.
Thank you, Mandip.
Thank you. Thank you.